On 5 News, could holidaymakers' lives have been saved during the Tunisia terror attacks? An inquest is told local police deliberately delayed going to the scene where 30 British tourists were killed. Families of the victims watched as harrowing footage was played. Also, Donald Trump praises Brexit and promises a quick trade deal with the UK.
I thought the UK was so smart in getting out.
The ex-minister who interviewed him tells us Trump has animal charisma. Remembering Katie, family and friends of the schoolgirl killed last week gather together on what would have been her 8th birthday. And Cilla Black in bronze. A statue of the star is unveiled in her home city of Liverpool. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. Families of the 30 British tourists killed in the Tunisian beach terror attack have heard how lives could have been saved if the security forces hadn't wasted time getting to the scene of the massacre. On the first day of the inquest into their deaths, the court heard how local police deliberately and unjustifiably slowed down as they made their way to the resort in Sousse during the attack in June 2015. Our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman, reports.
The youngest British victim was 19, the oldest 80 years old. From north and south, they were couples, friends, 3 generations of one family. 18 months after the murders, their relatives came to the Royal Courts of Justice seeking answers and prepared to hear harrowing details of the terror attack on innocent tourists. Some shook their heads. Others found it hard to watch as amateur video of the gunman's rampage in the resort of Sousse was played out. Seferdine Rezgui killed 38 tourists that day, 30 of them British. He chose the luxury Imperial Mahaba Hotel for his brutal assault. On the beach, then inside the hotel. Armed with a gun and grenades, his spree lasted more than 20 minutes before he was shot dead. Behind him, a trail of chaos, confusion, carnage. Families were assured that finding out exactly what happened to their relatives is at the heart of this inquest, but its scope is bigger than that. The coroner will look into the security arrangements at the hotel. He will ask whether or not the guests were well enough informed about the risk of a terror attack and whether the travel companies and Foreign Office gave adequate advice. There will be questions asked of the Tunisian authorities too. The QC for the inquest said evidence will be heard suggesting police deliberately and unjustifiably slowed down to delay their arrival at the hotel. They had the ability to put an end to the attack before police arrived, but wasted a considerable amount of time in getting to the hotel. Exactly why is not yet clear. It will take 7 weeks to go through all the evidence to make some sense of these terrible deaths so far from home.
Let's talk to Tessa now. She's at the Royal Courts of Justice in central London. I was hoping to speak to her. Maybe we can talk to her a little bit later on. Let's move on to other news. Donald Trump will be sworn in as US President in just 4 days, and in his first British interview, he's made it clear that striking a rapid trade deal with the UK will be one of his priorities. Well, the interview was with the ex-Minister and Conservative MP Michael Gove, who emerged full of praise from his hour with the President-elect, describing his sheer force of animal charisma. Here's our political editor, Andy Bell.
Long time ago.
He'll soon be swapping this desk for the one in the Oval Office. But in the week he becomes president, Donald Trump was keen to tell the world Brexit was right for Britain.
I thought the UK was so smart in getting out. And you were there and you guys wrote it, put it on the front page.
Yes.
Trump said that Brexit was going to happen.
Yes.
Right? And it happened.
Yes.
And that was what it was going to lose easily. You know, everybody thought I was crazy. Obama said they'll go to the back of the line, meaning if it does happen, and then he had to retract. That was a bad statement.
And now we're at the front of the queue.
I think you're doing great.
Yeah.
I think it's going great.
He didn't say front of the queue, but he did say he wanted a deal quickly. In what Michael Gove described as Trump's glittering man cave, there are plenty of pictures of the president-elect, including a Playboy cover, along with a collection of football helmets for someone who likes to tackle his opponents head-on. So what did this former minister and Brexit campaigner make of him?
I was struck by his sheer force of nature, animal charisma, and by his desire to get things done and by his energy. But I think it's also important to recognise that he sees himself as out of the conventional mould of politicians.
As Theresa May prepares a speech on leaving the EU for tomorrow, a vote of confidence from the most powerful man in the world has been welcomed. Others, though, are profoundly worried about post-Brexit Britain getting too close to the new president.
We need to be very careful as a country not to become a sort of pawn in this wider game in which Putin and Trump, in effect, sort of collude, oddly enough, having been rivals in the past, collude to the detriment of Europe.
Britain's relationship with Europe is about to be transformed. Its relationship with the US will be vital in just how that plays out.
Let's talk to Andy in Downing Street now. And Andy, what do they make there, really, of that interview?
Well, I'm sure, Sian, there was irritation in number 10 when a man that Theresa May sacked turned up in the President-elect's office. But having said that, they've welcomed what Donald Trump had to say to Michael Gove. And it's easy to see why, because Theresa May is about to go into these negotiations with 27 other governments plus the European Commission. On the face of it, Britain looks pretty much outnumbered. But now she is able to say, well, actually on our side, we have the most powerful man in the world at the head of the biggest economy in the world. He thinks Brexit's a good idea. He wants to boost trade and investment between the UK and the US, and you can see that that's going to be something that I think Theresa May will want to return to in her speech tomorrow, and a point that she will hope to have amplified when she gets to meet Donald Trump in Washington in the next few weeks.
Yes, it's good timing as far as the Prime Minister is concerned with that big speech tomorrow. What else can we expect from it, though?
Well, I think what we can expect is the most explicit statement yet from her that she is prepared to put the control of the UK borders as the priority in her negotiations. She's already signalled at the beginning of that Conservative Party conference last year, if you remember, that she said freedom of movement was no longer acceptable and that Britain would not be a member of the single market in the European Union if that was what was needed, and that we would not be part of the European Court of Justice jurisdiction. In other words, we wouldn't follow the rules set down by that body. All of that implies that Britain will leave the single market if necessary, because Theresa May, I think tomorrow, will set out that the priority has to be the control of the UK's borders and an end to free movement as we've known it inside the European Union.
Andy, thanks. Former youth football coach Barry Bennell has pleaded not guilty to 8 child abuse offences. The 63-year-old, who was the coach at Crewe Alexandra, appeared at Chester Crown Court this morning and was remanded in custody until late March. All the offences are alleged to have happened between 1981 and 1986. At least 37 people have died after a Turkish Airlines cargo plane crashed in heavy fog in Kyrgyzstan. The plane was attempting to land when it lost control and struck several houses in a village close to the main airport. Most of the victims were local residents. 5 people have been injured too seriously after a house explosion in Manchester. Emergency services were called to the property in Brackley just after midday today. The terraced property has been destroyed. It's not known what caused the explosion. Hundreds of balloons have been released in York to celebrate the life of Katie Ruff, who was killed last week. She would have turned 8 today. A 15-year-old who can't be named has been charged with her murder. Peter Lane reports.
For Katie Ruff's parents, Paul and Alison, the unimaginable pain of marking her birthday without her there. Katie would have been 8 years old today. Supported by the Archbishop of York, family and friends gathered this afternoon in the field next to Katie's school. Hundreds came. They wrote messages on notes tied to balloons and in birthday books. Messages to celebrate Katie's life and to mourn her loss. And at 4 o'clock, those balloons, in all the colours of the rainbow, were released into the sky for the little girl her family described as beautiful and creative. Katie Ruff's family also issued a statement today thanking the community for helping to mark her birthday and for all the messages of support they've received. There were birthday tributes too among the flowers left at the spot where Katie was discovered last Monday. It's a week now since Katie Ruff was found fatally wounded on the grass at the end of this footpath. She was taken to hospital but couldn't be saved. The 15-year-old girl who's charged with her murder is due in court for the next hearing in this case on February the 16th. Katie Ruffs' family wanted to share her birthday with as many people as possible, and for her memory to bring a community together. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Coming up on 5 News. Raising awareness why black men are more at risk of prostate cancer. And find out what Cilla's grandchildren make of her statue in Liverpool.
She'll be very surprised and honoured to have a statue of her, which is going to be here forever.
We'll see you after the break. Hello and welcome back. You're watching 5 News. In the last 15 minutes, more than a decade of power sharing in Northern Ireland has come to an end. Sinn Féin had until 5 o'clock to nominate a replacement for the Deputy First Minister, Martin McGuinness, who resigned last week. But the party refused, meaning a snap election is imminent. The collapse of Stormont could also complicate Britain's exit from the EU, as Catherine Jones reports.
The deadline has passed, with no last-minute reprieve to save Northern Ireland from political deadlock. On the streets of Belfast, there's little sympathy for the politicians who made it happen.
I just think they're a bunch of idiots.
Both sides?
All of them.
Power sharing can work. It's up to the people themselves to make it work.
They're just bickering and arguing like they're in primary school, and they need to stop it.
It's 7 days since Martin McGuinness from Republican Party Sinn Féin resigned as Deputy First Minister.
Sinn Féin wants equality and respect for everyone. And that's what this process must be about.
As opposing parties are obliged to share power here, his departure brought down the First Minister Arlene Foster, the leader of the largest unionist party, the DUP. The pair had struggled to work together, and the last straw was Mrs Foster's refusal to step aside during an inquiry into a green energy scheme she set up that has squandered millions. Today, Mrs Foster remained defiant.
They did not like the election result last May, and therefore they're looking to have another go at the election.
And so, as they'd threatened, this afternoon Sinn Féin refused to replace Mr McGuinness, meaning Northern Ireland is heading to a snap election.
If we're to return to this chamber, then there must be real, meaningful change.
The fear is that instead of solving the problem, a bitterly contested election campaign will only drive a wedge further between the politicians here and between the groups of people they represent.
They'll pull out the same flags and they'll pull out the same cliches and people will just follow.
Do you know, that war should be over. It's never going to end. So it's never ever going to end.
A decade of sharing power has ended bitterly. An election offers Northern Ireland a fresh start, but in a direction no one can yet predict.
Catherine is at Stormont for us now. So an unsettling time there, Catherine. What does happen?
Well, just in the last half hour, the members of Sinn Féin here at the Assembly in Stormont have walked out a final departure, a final turning their backs on being in government here effectively. And in the next half hour, we're expecting to hear from the Northern Ireland Secretary, James Brokenshire. He's here, he's going to make a statement, but to be honest, he hasn't got much wiggle room because he's legally obliged to call an election now. But of course, what he and everyone else here is very mindful of is the unfortunate timing of this, because just as the clock will start to tick down towards an election here in Northern Ireland, the countdown also begins, as you might say, for the United Kingdom's departure from the EU in late March. And there's no guarantee that the people here after the election are going to be able to form some kind of power-sharing government. Could that leave Northern Ireland without a voice just as the Brexit negotiations begin?
OK, Cathy, thanks for that. A sham wedding fixer who was outed by a Channel 5 documentary has been sent to prison.
Anybody knows of a legal reason why the marriage should not take place today?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Shahina Perveen, who called herself Elizabeth, asked for £5,000 from an Indian man called Ali who wanted a British passport. But little did they realise that their bride was actually an undercover journalist. Ms Perveen was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Ali was sentenced to 17 months. Some of the most prominent black men in the UK have joined forces to raise awareness of the risks of prostate cancer. The boxer David Haye, actor Danny John Jules and Olympian Linford Christie are part of the Stronger Knowing More campaign, which aims to encourage more conversation about the disease. Well, every year, more than 11,000 men in the UK die from prostate cancer, and that's one every hour. On average, 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed in their lifetime, but for black men, that risk is double. It's 1 in 4, and 1 in 12 will die from the disease. Our reporter, Toby Sadler, has more.
Young man, can I leave one of these?
Errol McKellar is trying to stop men dying from prostate cancer. He hands out 100 campaign leaflets every day. The 59-year-old got the all clear from the disease himself in 2010. Customers to his East London garage even get a discount if they get tested.
I always relate it to a car, and I say, look, if there's a problem with your car, you come in to see me, right? What's the difference between you going to your doctor and you coming in here with your car?
The awareness you brought to me,
yeah,
you are my hero.
Thomas Kagazi is one of the 46 men who found they had cancer after Errol urged them to get a test. He's getting treatment and his prognosis is good, but he had no idea he was in an at-risk group.
I'm an exercise fanatic. I've done every race you can think of. So there was no need for me to check for prostate cancer. And I owe everything to Errol, because if he didn't tell me to go and check for prostate, it would be a different story.
Errol is now part of a charity campaign to spread the message further. He's teaming up with some of Britain's most prominent black men, including David Haye, Linford Christie and the actor Danny John Jules. But what remains a mystery is just why black men are twice as likely to get prostate cancer as white men.
We do think that there's something in genetics, but the research hasn't been able to kind of unlock that mystery. And so that's a continuing effort in the research community to understand why. But at the same time of understanding why, we're also trying to make sure that there's an effective test and screening mechanism.
Errol McKellar knows he has already saved lives. And while he keeps doing that, his campaign will never stop. Toby Sadler, 5 News.
And if you want more information about prostate cancer, do visit our Facebook page. We've got a guide to the risks and the symptoms there. And remember, you can get future updates from us if you like our Facebook page. Now it's been a historic day for Liverpool's music scene as the Cavern Club celebrates its 60th birthday and its most famous cloakroom girl. This morning, hundreds of people gathered outside the venue to see a bronze statue of Cilla Black unveiled. It was donated by her 3 sons, who've been overwhelmed by the support from her beloved home city. Minnie Stevenson has been catching up with them.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Cilla Black.
The Liverpool girl, known and loved in living rooms across Britain, came home today as Cilla Black's sons unveiled a statue in memory of their mum outside the famous Cavern Club. A gift from them to a city who have shared their grief. Cilla's eldest Robert told me Cilla never forgot her roots were firmly here. Your mum was so loved by the world and also by the people of Liverpool.
Yeah.
What was it like to share that grief with so many people?
Well, I mean, we're very early on, not long after she died, we were bowled over, literally, by the response from the whole country, but especially this city. And it was a real beacon of hope for us. And, you know, it was quite traumatic, and it was, you know, it was a very intense time. But to see the outpouring of love and support, it lifts you. And it profoundly moved us.
With warmth and wit, Cilla made millions laugh as the queen of Saturday night entertainment. But she was a star who came from humble beginnings. In the swinging 60s, you'd find a young Cilla working here in the cloakroom of the Cavern Club. It's where she met a little band called the Beatles, starting her own singing career after John Lennon introduced Cilla to their manager. Today, Lennon's sister told 5 News as the club turned 60, there was something unique about the spirit of the scene they all grew up in.
Being in Liverpool in the 60s was like living in the centre of the universe, and I thought, yes, because it was. And guess what? It still is.
Cilla's grandchildren say Granny would be a big fan.
I think she'll be very surprised and honoured to have a statue of her, which is going to be here forever.
And Max, what about you?
Yeah, well, I think she would have loved it, and it's nice to see how when she passed away, they built a statue, and it's like she's here again.
Cilla Black, a star loved by the nation, but forever from Liverpool. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Just before we go, Matt has joined us to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Sian. We're going to be live from Stormont with the very latest on the imminent Northern Ireland election announcements, including that expected announcement from the Secretary of State. Also, I'll be joined by Red Dwarf star Danny John Jules. He's going to be here to talk about the shocking number of black men who are at risk of prostate cancer. He is back in the campaign to try to get more men talking about the disease. We'll also be chatting about the stresses many working dads experience when trying to balance their careers with time with their kids. According to new figures, almost half of dads would like a less stressful job so they can spend more time at home. A third would earn less to spend more time with their kids, Sian. So we're talking about that in an hour's time.
And whether it's possible to have it all.
Probably not.
I think the answer is no.
No, it's
actually, for either men or women. Thank you, Matt. See you a little bit later on. Look forward to that one. Thank you. That's it for now. Claire Nazir has the weather for you next. I will see you again tomorrow at 5. Matt, of course, back at 6:30. Thanks for watching tonight. Goodbye for now.